You want to finally understand Golden Freddy, the most mysterious, argued over, reality-breaking character in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. Golden Freddy isn't just another haunted suit. This is the spirit, or spirits, who bend the rules of the franchise, break the logic of the animatronics, and appear in ways no other entity ever has. Most fans know Golden Freddy is important, but what they don't realize is that his story begins decades before the first game, connects directly to two of the most tragic children in the series, and ends with William Afton trapped in a personal hell that only Golden Freddy could create. Whether you're listening to fall asleep, to study, or to just relax, there won't be any loud jumps or sudden noises, just a steady walkthrough of the entire Golden Freddy story, every theory and every timeline piece connected together. Please feel free to subscribe. It helps me keep making these for you. Part 1. The Birth of Fredbear, the first golden animatronic. The story of Golden Freddy begins not with a ghostly entity or a terrifying hallucination, but with a foundational piece of technology and a crucial business partnership. The starting point for this entire complex narrative is the character known as Fredbear, the original iconic golden mascot who represented the birth of Fazbear Entertainment. Fredbear was the very first animatronic created through the collaboration between Henry Emily and William Afton. This suit was more than just a stage performer. It was a groundbreaking prototype. It utilized an engineering innovation known as spring-lock technology. This system was remarkably ambitious for its time. A spring-lock suit was designed to function in two distinct modes. In its primary mode, it operated as a fully functional, autonomous animatronic character, singing and dancing on stage to entertain children. In its secondary mode, however, it could be manually converted into a wearable costume. An employee could crank down the internal robotic components, the endoskeleton and heavy mechanisms, which would be tightly compressed and held back against the suit's walls by a series of high-tension spring mechanisms. This conversion allowed a worker to climb inside and interact directly with the restaurant patrons, increasing the immersive experience. This versatility was the core selling point of the early restaurants. It allowed for unprecedented interaction between the mascot and the children, a novelty that drew massive crowds. However, this same dual-purpose design was also the source of the suit's critical and fatal flaw. The spring locks were inherently unstable. They were complex mechanical structures that relied on extremely delicate mechanisms, primarily designed by William Afton, to keep the massive endoskeleton components pinned away from the human occupant. The safety margins were minimal, built on the assumption of perfect operating conditions. This fragility set the stage for the potential disaster that would define the character and the franchise's tragic history. The suit's design essentially put a human occupant inside a compressed industrial machine, held back only by delicate tension. Any internal moisture, sweat, tears, or spilled liquids could lubricate the mechanisms, causing the springs to slip. Any sudden movement or jarring impact could loosen the pins holding the mechanisms. If the spring locks failed, the compressed endoskeleton would violently deploy, turning the suit instantly from a costume into an Iron Maiden, crushing the person inside. The existence of the Fredbear suit, therefore, is the beginning of the end. It represented a beautiful, innovative vision from Henry Emily, the desire to bring joy and wonder, corrupted by the cold, unstable engineering of William Afton. The Fredbear suit, the physical manifestation of this partnership, was always destined to be a symbol of betrayal and corporate negligence. Its creation laid the functional, physical groundwork for the major tragedies. the later death of Henry's daughter, the injury of William's own son, and the subsequent mass murders, the golden animatronic suit was, from its inception, a ticking mechanical bomb wrapped in a cheerful facade. Part 2. The Afton-Emily Partnership and the Springlock Era. The early history of Fazbear Entertainment is entirely defined by the collaboration between its two co-founders, William Afton, the engineering mind, and Henry Emily, the creative visionary. The Springlock Era, centered around the two original mascots, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, represents the high point of their partnership and the absolute beginning of the franchise's tragedy. Fredbear's Family Diner, the initial restaurant, featured only these two golden characters, Fredbear, the bear mascot, and Spring Bonnie, the rabbit mascot, were the singular stars, embodying the concept of the interactive family diner. They were not merely products of a design team. They were the direct result of a shared, yet ultimately conflicting vision. Henry provided the atmosphere, the concept, and the family-friendly foundation, while William provided the cold, complex, and deeply unstable springlock technology that made the suit's dual purpose. William Afton was the core engineer behind the springlock system. His genius was undeniable, but his designs were often overly complex, prioritizing mechanical novelty over safety. The springlocks were a masterpiece of competent engineering, allowing the massive endoskeleton to retract fully. This technological innovation gave their business a critical edge, allowing employees to surprise children and create memorable moments. This mechanical sophistication, however, came with severe liabilities. The springlock suits required an almost impossible standard of maintenance and safety adherence. Internal Fazbear Entertainment documents reveal the strict, essential safety protocols that govern their use. No moisture. The biggest threat to the suits was water. Any moisture, from sweat due to exertion, heavy breathing, or spilled beverages, could corrode or lubricate the delicate spring mechanisms, causing them to fail immediately. No sudden movements. Employees were required to maintain slow, deliberate movements while wearing the suits. A sudden jolt, a slip, or a fall could jar the internal mechanisms and cause the endoskeleton to violently deploy, leading to a catastrophic accident. Constant inspections. The suits required constant, detailed maintenance checks, which, in the messy, high-turnover environment of a family restaurant, were virtually impossible to execute with consistency. The existence of these two golden suits, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, represents the foundational tragedy of the franchise. They were symbols of innovation and shared ambition, but they were intrinsically dangerous due to corporate negligence and the unstable engineering at their core. The suits themselves were silent testament to William Afton's emerging darkness, as he continued to design, build, and deploy technology he knew was highly dangerous, prioritizing the functional goal of the dual-purpose suite over any potential human cost. This era, defined by the instability of the springlocks, establishes the golden suits as fundamental symbols of fatal corporate error. They are the physical vehicles of the initial tragedies, the bite of '83, and the later fate of William Afton himself, ensuring that the golden animatronics, which should represent the joy of the franchise's beginning, instead represent its most dangerous and enduring failures. Part 3. Early accidents and the fragile springlock system. The devastating incidents that eventually cemented the Golden Freddy entity in the lore were not sudden, unforeseen tragedies. They were the inevitable result of a dangerous technological design repeatedly ignored by the early management of Fazbear Entertainment. The springlock system, though innovative, was deeply flawed, and the company received multiple clear warnings about its instability long before the major fatal incidents occurred. Internal documents and audio training tapes, which surfaced throughout the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, confirm the extreme fragility of the springlock system. These records detail what the company referred to as multiple and simultaneous springlock failures. These were not minor mechanical glitches. These were severe accidents where the endoskeleton mechanisms deployed while employees were inside, causing severe, often life-threatening injuries. These early warnings highlight the profound corporate negligence that permeates the franchise's history. The company, facing liability issues and unable to guarantee the safety of its staff, was forced to issue memos and tapes instructing employees on the essential, near-impossible safety measures required to operate the suits. These warnings included strict instructions about avoiding moisture, limiting movement, and adhering to specific protocols for decommissioning the suits after an accident. Despite the mounting evidence of danger, the springlock suits remained in service for a crucial period. This continued deployment, even after employees were injured, underscores the dangerous priorities of the company's founders, particularly William Afton, who understood the mechanics better than anyone. He chose to maintain the suit's operational status, perhaps driven by the unique competitive advantage the dual-purpose mascots provided, or perhaps driven by a growing cold indifference to human safety. Eventually, the pressure from these accidents led to a temporary halt in the use of the springlock suits. Internal policy shifted, and employees were instructed that the suits were temporarily restricted from employee use and should be decommissioned and moved to safe storage rooms. The danger was too high. The liability was too great. This sequence of events, accidents, warnings, temporary restriction, is crucial to the Golden Freddy story for several reasons. First, it establishes the inherent physical danger of the Fredbear suit before the bite of 83. The failure of the springlocks during the bite was not an anomaly. It was the ultimate tragic expression of a well-documented mechanical fault. Second, the decommissioning of the suits explains why the Fredbear and Spring Bonnie suits were largely inactive or absent from later stages of the company's history, perfectly setting them up to become abandoned, unoccupied vessels ready to be possessed by vengeful spirits. The reports of early springlock failures foreshadow the eventual devastating fate of William Afton himself years later, when he attempts to use the decaying Spring Bonnie suit for shelter, only to be crushed by the same flawed mechanisms he designed. The fragility of the springlocks is the narrative device that binds the first great tragedy to the final act of vengeance. Part 4. The Crying Child. Fear, Trauma and Fate, pre-83. The identity of Golden Freddy is inextricably linked to the first great tragedy in the timeline, the bite of 83. At the center of this tragedy is the crying child, widely accepted in the community to be Evan Afton, the youngest son of the antagonist, William Afton. His life was characterized by intense trauma and profound fear, setting him on a direct path to his devastating fate. The crying child's existence, as revealed primarily through the minigames of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, was a miserable experience dominated by terror. He was highly sensitive and psychologically fragile. His great fear was focused specifically on the animatronics, particularly Fredbear and the other characters at his father's restaurants. This fear was constant, manifesting in his tears, his isolation, and his desperate pleas not to be taken to the family diner. The source of his fear is speculated to be multi-layered. It is possible he witnessed something unsettling, perhaps an early springlock accident involving an employee, or possibly even one of his father's earliest undiscovered crimes. William Afton, at this time, was already exhibiting dark tendencies, having already committed his first confirmed murder, that of Henry's daughter, Charlotte Emily, the puppet. The crying child may have understood, on a subconscious or visceral level, the inherent danger of his father's creations and the darkness surrounding the family business. The crying child's emotional anchor in the game is his Fredbear plushie. This plush toy, a non-threatening soft representation of the terrifying stage mascot, served as his sole companion and critically his internal monologue. The plushie speaks to him throughout the 5 Nights at Freddy's 4 minigames, offering comfort, making promises, and guiding his movements. This plushie is more than just a toy. It is a vital narrative device that binds the child's soul and consciousness to the character of Fredbear, which becomes essential later in the possession argument for Golden Freddy. The crying child was relentlessly tormented by his older brother, Michael Afton, and Michael's friends. This torment was constant and psychological, involving jumping out at him from corners while wearing the animatronic masks. This sibling abuse elevated his intense fear of the characters into a full-blown phobia. This constant trauma created a psychological pressure cooker, building inexorably toward the moment of his birthday party. His profound fear, his deep psychological connection to the Fredbear plush, and the constant stress of being tormented by Michael all contributed to his total emotional collapse on the day of his birthday party in 1983. His fate, the horrific accident that occurs with the Fredbear suit, is a direct consequence of the physical instability of the animatronics and the psychological trauma inflicted by his family. His connection to the physical suit, the proximity of his death to the mascot, and his deep trauma make him a primary strong candidate for one of the spirits that eventually possesses the vengeful apparition-like entity known as Golden Freddy. His story is the foundation of the passive, mournful side of the split Golden Freddy entity. Part 5. Cassidy. Personality, life, and why she stands out. The second primary candidate for the identity of Golden Freddy, and the source of its immense, unparalleled rage, is the mysterious child known as Cassidy. While the crying child's story is rooted in the trauma of the Afton family, Cassidy's lore is derived from the aftermath of the missing children incident and the pursuit of relentless, eternal vengeance against William Afton. Cassidy's history before her death is intentionally vague. She is one of the 5 children murdered by William Afton in 1985 at the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. The only substantial clues to her identity come from the survival logbook and the voice lines and themes of Ultimate Custom Night, UCN. Her name, Cassidy, is strongly indicated through decoded messages and ciphers found within the logbook, making her a canon victim of the MCI. What truly distinguishes Cassidy from the other murdered children, Gabriel, Freddy, Jeremy, Bonnie, Susie, Chica, and Fritz, Foxy, is her intense, uncompromising rage. While the other souls were also vengeful and sought justice, they eventually found a form of peace, culminating in the Happiest Day minigame sequence and the final fire in Pizzeria Simulator. Cassidy, however, is the anomaly. She is the stubborn, strong-willed spirit who refuses to let go, whose anger transcends simple justice and demands eternal, excruciating punishment. Her unique, intense temperament positions her as the primary force behind the phrase, "the one you should not have killed," a label that defines the player's relentless torment in UCN. She is the spirit who actively chooses to keep William Afton's soul trapped in a personalized eternal hell, preventing him from finding peace or destruction after the Pizzeria Simulator fire. The possession of Golden Freddy by Cassidy is crucial because it accounts for the entity's supernatural power. Golden Freddy is not bound by the physical rules of the other possessed animatronics. It teleports, manifests as a hallucination, and can crash the game, reflecting a spirit that possesses unique, reality-warping abilities. This level of power is attributed to Cassidy's intense emotional residue of agony and her refusal to move on. The question of why Cassidy's soul attached to the Golden Freddy suit is complex. The suit was likely already stored away or decommissioned by 1985. Her possession could have been a result of the puppet transferring her soul into the vacant suit, or, due to the intensity of her death agony, she may have simply latched onto the most available, decommissioned Fredbear iteration nearby, a vessel related to the first tragedies of the franchise. Cassidy's story shifts the narrative focus from tragedy to justice. She is not a passive victim. She is the active architect of William Afton's eternal suffering. Her unique, defining characteristic of unending vengeance makes her the necessary component for the powerful, supernatural nature of the Golden Freddy entity, representing the aggressive, punishing consciousness of the dual soul theory. Part 6. The puppet's role in soul transfer and possession. To understand how a child's soul, whether it is the crying child or Cassidy, can inhabit an inanimate suit like Golden Freddy, one must understand the central mechanism of possession in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, Remnant, and the actions of the puppet. The puppet, which is possessed by the soul of Charlotte Emily, Charlie, Henry's daughter, serves as the spiritual bridge that allows the haunting to occur. Charlie was William Afton's first murder victim, killed outside the first restaurant before the bite of 83. Her soul, driven by a powerful desire to protect the innocent, found its way into the puppet animatronic. This act of original possession granted the puppet unique spiritual capabilities and a deep, intuitive understanding of the process of soul transfer. The gift of life. The puppet's crucial canonical act occurs after the missing children incident in 1985. The minigame sequence known as Give Gifts, Give Life illustrates this process. The puppet finds the bodies of the 5 murdered children. Using the residual agony, or remnant, left by the children's traumatic deaths, the puppet places their souls into the 5 available animatronic suits: Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the 5th child, who becomes Golden Freddy. This established the primary canon for animatronic possession. A soul needs a suitable vessel and a supernatural catalyst, which the puppet provides. Golden Freddy's unique possession. The possession of Golden Freddy is often debated as being slightly different, challenging the clear structure of the other 4 animatronics. Passive possession, crying child. If the crying child, Evan, possessed Golden Freddy, his soul attached directly to the Fredbear suit in 1983, immediately after the bite, before the puppet was officially involved in the MCI possession. This would be a more direct accidental spiritual attachment, driven by his trauma and the proximity of his death to the suit. Active possession, Cassidy. If Cassidy possessed Golden Freddy, her soul was intentionally placed there by the puppet in 1985 as part of the MCI. Since the Golden Freddy suit was likely decommissioned and stored, the puppet could have chosen it as a suitable vessel for the final vengeful soul. In the prevailing dual soul theory, the puppet's action in 1985 likely cemented the entity's power by injecting Cassidy's rage into the already haunted Fredbear suit, creating the powerful, dual-faceted Golden Freddy. The puppet, through the power of Remnant, essentially created the primary haunting force of the franchise. The existence of the puppet and its ability to transfer souls is the supernatural foundation of the law. It ensures that the tragic physical deaths of the children do not simply end the story. Instead, their agony is preserved, transformed into the remnant energy that binds their spirits to the machines. The puppet is the compassionate catalyst that turns innocent victims into vengeful animatronics, giving the haunting a purpose and an origin that transcends a simple horror story. Part 7. The 1983 Party. Escalation to disaster. The first major catastrophic tragedy of the FNaF timeline, the event that directly binds the crying child to the character of Fredbear, is the infamous Bite of 83. The setting for this disaster was the crying child's birthday party at Fredbear's family diner in November 1983. This was the moment the years of fear and family trauma reached a violent terminal climax. The atmosphere of the diner on that day was a juxtaposition of two conflicting emotional states. For the general crowd, the restaurant was the height of celebration, a joyful, loud environment filled with music and the spectacle of the golden animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. For the crying child, however, the day was a profound nightmare. The entire sequence, vividly shown in the FNaF 4 minigames, portrays his increasing panic and isolation. The emotional stakes were impossibly high. The crying child, already a sensitive boy tormented by his deep, crippling fear of the mascots, was being forced to confront the very source of his phobia on a day that should have been celebratory. His father, William Afton, was likely busy with business or distracted, leaving the boy vulnerable. The key antagonist in this sequence is Michael Afton, the crying child's older brother. Michael, along with his group of friends, who often wore the masks of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, had been relentlessly bullying his younger brother throughout the week. The birthday party represented Michael's final cruel escalation of this abuse. Michael and his friends viewed the crying child's terror as entertainment. They cornered the boy, who was already sobbing uncontrollably, seeing his tears and panic as proof of their successful prank. This peer pressure and sibling cruelty led directly to the critical, fatal action. The atmosphere of the party, the chaos of the crowd, and the physical isolation of the crying child all contributed to the escalating disaster. The moment Michael and his friends decided to physically lift the crying child and carry him over to the main stage was the point of no return. They intended to mock him by forcing him to give Fredbear a big kiss. But their reckless behavior and the sheer noise and chaos of the crowded party environment created the perfect conditions for mechanical failure. The Bite of 83 was a horrific, accidental tragedy stemming from negligence and cruelty, not intentional murder. The tension and trauma of the child's life, the unchecked cruelty of his brother, and the inherent instability of the Fredbear suit all converged at that single chaotic moment on the stage, setting the stage for the literal crushing force of the Springlogs. This sequence of events is the primary evidence that the crying child's agony is intrinsically linked to the physical form of Fredbear, which becomes the vessel for Golden Freddy. Part 8. The Bite of 83. What actually happens to the crying child? The infamous Bite of 83 is the first definitive high-casualty event in the FNaF timeline, directly connecting the crying child, Evan, to the animatronic known as Fredbear. It is an essential moment that provides the traumatic origin for one side of the Golden Freddy identity. The tragic sequence unfolds on the stage of Fredbear's family diner. The crying child, terrified and immobilized by panic, is cornered and lifted by his older brother, Michael Afton, and his friends. They lift the struggling boy and, as a final brutal prank, force his head directly into the open mouth of the singing and swaying Fredbear animatronic. The critical confluence of events happened next. Reckless action, the violent, jerking motion of Michael and his friends lifting and shoving the child into the animatronic's jaw, caused a massive jolt to the aging, delicate spring-lock mechanisms inside the Fredbear suit. Spring-lock failure. The internal mechanisms, already unstable due to potential moisture or wear, instantly failed under the stress. The mechanical tension holding the heavy endoskeleton components back was released. Fatal injury. The animatronic's massive spring-loaded upper jaw slammed shut. The force of the thick metal and plastic endoskeleton crushing down was catastrophic, instantly causing a severe crushing injury to the crying child's skull. The minigames that depict this event are explicit, showing the moment of impact and the subsequent collapse of the child, surrounded by the screaming faces of the bullies and the horrified patrons. The incident immediately transformed the celebratory atmosphere into a scene of unspeakable trauma and medical emergency. The child was rushed to the hospital, where he remained in a coma for several days. The internal monologue within the FNaF 4 minigame shifts to the hospital room, indicated by the IV drip and flower vases. The child's final moments are spent hearing the apology and regret of his brother, Michael, and the comforting, mysterious voice of the Fredbear plushie, promising to put you back together. The importance of the physical location of the injury is paramount. The crying child's death agony occurred directly within the physical structure of the Fredbear animatronic. In the lore of FNaF, extreme emotional trauma and death agony leave behind a metaphysical residue known as remnant, which is the energy source that facilitates possession. The direct physical proximity of his death to the suit is the primary evidence suggesting that the child's soul, fueled by this agony, naturally latched onto the machine where he was fatally injured, becoming the passive, mournful spirit within the Golden Freddy entity. The Bite of 83 was the devastating mechanical realization of the Springlock's inherent flaw and the tragic culmination of William Afton's neglectful parenting and Michael's cruelty. It binds the soul of the crying child forever to the golden suit, ensuring that Fredbear, the first mascot, is also the first monument to the franchise's deep, originating tragedy. Part 9. I Will Put You Back Together. Who says it and why it matters. The final message in the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 minigame sequence, I Will Put You Back Together, is arguably the most crucial, mysterious line in the entire early timeline. This phrase, displayed over the dying crying child in the hospital, is essential because it implies a promise of survival, rebirth, or spiritual reconstruction, which lies at the core of Golden Freddy's unusual, powerful existence. The speaker of this line is intentionally ambiguous, leading to several compelling, distinct theories that shape the lore surrounding the Golden animatronic. Identifying the speaker helps to identify which spiritual entity has the strongest claim to the final identity of the entity. Theory 1. The Fredbear plush. The most literal interpretation is that the voice belongs to the Fredbear plushie. The plush has acted as the crying child's constant companion and internal voice throughout the minigames, offering comfort and issuing warnings. If the plushie is the speaker, it suggests the plush itself holds a form of consciousness or is being used as a vessel. The plush is often theorized to be surveilled by William Afton, as evidenced by a small hidden camera on the plush shown in some lore interpretations. Or, more powerfully, it may be a vessel for the spirit of Charlotte Emily, Charlie the puppet. If Charlie is speaking through the plush, the phrase is a promise from the primary soul transfer agent in the lore. Charlie is promising to place the crying child's soul into the closest available vessel, the Fredbear animatronic, thereby initiating his possession of the golden suit. This theory connects the Bite of 83 victim directly to the franchise's core possession mechanism. Theory 2. William Afton's Dark Promise. A more sinister interpretation posits that the voice belongs to William Afton. He is the only person with the knowledge and capability to rebuild a human body using robotic mechanisms. If William is the speaker, the phrase is not an act of comfort, but a dark, chilling promise of scientific reconstruction. This promise might explain the existence of the animatronic known as the Funtime Freddy, or the constant, recurring attempts by William Afton to use remnant and agony to defeat death. The put you back together idea could refer to putting the child's soul or consciousness back into a mechanical host. Theory 3. The crying child's own soul. The phrase might be the crying child's own fragmented consciousness speaking to itself as he succumbs to the injury. It is a desperate, primal expression of a soul refusing to die, immediately latching onto the nearest familiar object, the Fredbear mascot, to achieve a form of life after the catastrophic failure of his body. This theory directly supports the idea that the crying child's soul is the foundational identity-defining spirit of Golden Freddy. Regardless of the speaker, the line matters because it implies a specific form of survival or rebirth that is central to the Golden Freddy entity. Unlike the victims of the missing children incident who were deliberately murdered and stuffed into suits, the crying child's death was accidental, yet it resulted in a similar form of spiritual attachment, setting up the complex dual soul possession that complicates the timeline. Part 10. The crying child's death and potential possession of Fredbear. Following the catastrophic bite of 83, the crying child lingered for a brief period in the hospital before ultimately succumbing to the severe head trauma. His death, while technically accidental, is the crucial event that initiates the first potential possession path for the Golden Freddy entity. Due to the specifics of his trauma and the location of the incident, there is immense evidence suggesting that his soul became the foundational spirit attached to the Fredbear animatronic. The core argument for the crying child possessing the golden suit rests on the concept of remnant and physical proximity. In the lore of the franchise, a soul's agony, the immense trauma of a violent, painful death, leaves behind a powerful spiritual residue known as remnant. This energy is the binding force that allows a soul to possess an inanimate mechanical object. The crying child died directly after being fatally crushed by the Fredbear suit. His final, intense emotional output, terror, pain, and the trauma of betrayal, occurred either inside the suit's mouth or in the immediate vicinity of the massive golden animatronic. This direct, violent physical connection ensures that the Fredbear suit became saturated with his residual agony. The evidence for possession, identity match. The suit he possessed is a version of Fredbear, the exact animatronic responsible for his death, and the character he feared most. Golden Freddy is canonically an iteration of the Yellow Bear mascot. This direct link provides the identity of the spirit. Supernatural nature. The crying child's existence was characterized by intense, supernatural paranoia and an attachment to the spirit vessel of the plush toy. Golden Freddy manifests in the first 5 nights at Freddy's game, not as a walking animatronic, but as a hallucination, capable of warping reality and crashing the game. This non-physical, powerful nature aligns perfectly with a spirit that never found peace and manifested through raw agony rather than a conventional stuffing. The promise. The phrase, "I will put you back together," strongly implies a successful spiritual reassembly, often achieved through possession. This is the promise of continued existence made in his final moments. If the crying child is Golden Freddy, he represents the passive, mournful spirit of the entity. His haunting is not initially driven by active vengeance, but by unresolved trauma, sadness, and the intense psychological residue of his final moments. His spiritual attachment, occurring in 1983, predates the missing children incident of 1985, making him the earliest established haunting in the franchise directly related to the animatronics. His possession of the golden suit lays the essential groundwork for the later, more vengeful possession by Cassidy. The crying child's spirit provided the vessel and the base identity, ready to be co-inhabited by a spirit of immense rage, setting up the complex dual soul theory that dominates the modern interpretation of the entity. Part 11. The Missing Children Incident. William's first mass murder. The entire narrative of Five Nights at Freddy's is fundamentally rooted in the tragedy of the missing children incident. This event, which occurred in 1985 at the first official Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, is distinct from the accidental bite of '83 and introduced the spirit of Cassidy into the lore, establishing the vengeful core of the Golden Freddy entity. The incident was a deliberate, horrific act of mass murder committed by William Afton. At this point in the timeline, Afton was already descending into deep madness, having already murdered Charlotte Emily, Charlie, Henry's daughter, which led to the possession of the puppet. The missing children incident marked his first mass-scale crime against children, and the moment he actively created the primary haunting force that would define his eternal torment. The exact details are revealed through newspaper clippings, minigames, and police reports scattered across the game series. Afton, likely using his access as a co-owner and engineer, lured 5 children away from the main public area of the pizzeria. Key details of the missing children incident: the victim count. While police reports initially mentioned 2 children, the lore confirms 5 victims: Gabriel, Freddy, Jeremy, Bonnie, Susie, Chica, Fritz, Foxy, and the 5th unnamed child, confirmed by the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame, who became Golden Freddy. This 5th child is identified as Cassidy. The method. Afton used a familiar costume to lure the children to a safe room or back room, likely the Spring Bonnie suit, which was still in storage from the Springlock era. This trust, based on the familiar mascot, allowed him to isolate the children without suspicion. The aftermath. After the murders, Afton stuffed the 5 bodies into the core 4 animatronic suits and the decommissioned golden suit. This act of violating the vessels with the children's remains and immense agony infused the suits with enough remnant to allow for immediate, powerful possession. The missing children incident transformed the entire Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location into a haunted house. The residual agony of the 5 children, their souls bound to the endoskeletons and fabric of the suits, manifested as the aggressive, autonomous behavior of the animatronics at night. This event is the direct cause of the haunting that occurs in the original Five Nights at Freddy's game. For Golden Freddy, the incident is crucial because it provides the second most powerful soul, Cassidy. While the Fredbear suite was already passively haunted by the crying child's trauma, Cassidy's arrival in 1985, injected with a fresh, active rage from the recent murder, provided the distinct, angry consciousness that would later dedicate itself to the specific task of punishing William Afton. This fusion of a passive trauma and active vengeance defines the complex duality of the Golden Freddy entity. Part 12. Cassidy's death. Why her revenge is special. Cassidy is the final essential piece of the Golden Freddy identity, providing the entity with its terrifying supernatural power and its enduring, singular purpose. As the fifth victim of the missing children incident in 1985, her death was brutal and tragic, yet her spiritual response to the trauma set her apart from the other victims. Her intense emotional resistance is why her revenge is considered special and uncompromising. Unlike the other children, who, while vengeful, were primarily focused on keeping William Afton away or simply attacking night guards, Cassidy developed an absolute, unyielding obsession with retribution. She is characterized in the lore, particularly through evidence in the ultimate custom night game, as being strong-willed, stubborn, and filled with intense burning wrath. Why Cassidy stands out: refusal to move on. The primary evidence of her unique power is her refusal to accept spiritual freedom. The final canonical goal of Henry and Michael Afton was to free the children's souls through the massive fire in Pizzeria Simulator. The souls of Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, and Fritz were successfully freed and moved on, as was the soul of Charlie. However, Cassidy's soul, which animated the Golden Freddy entity, actively refused the release. The architect of purgatory. Cassidy's ultimate act was to seize control of William Afton's soul after the pizzeria fire failed to destroy him entirely. She dragged his soul into a personalized dimension of torment, which the community recognizes as ultimate custom night. She engineered an eternal, inescapable punishment loop for Afton, forcing him to be perpetually hunted by the characters he created and destroyed. Unparalleled focus, her entire spiritual existence became singularly focused on William Afton. She is the voice who proclaims, "I will keep him here," confirming that she possesses the spiritual authority to overrule the natural order of death and torment her killer endlessly. This intensity makes her the definitive source of the Golden Freddy entity's unique, terrifying qualities seen in the games. Its ability to teleport, defy physical laws, and manifest as a crashing, reality-warping apparition. She is not merely haunting a building. She is exercising immense power over life, death, and the afterlife. The spiritual fusion of Cassidy's active rage with the crying child's passive trauma creates the dual-faceted entity that is Golden Freddy. Cassidy is the consciousness and the anger that powers the entity, utilizing the Fredbear vessel, which the crying child's soul is already attached to, as the perfect symbol of Afton's original crimes, the bite of 83, and the later ones, the missing children incident. Her special, unrelenting revenge is the reason Golden Freddy is considered the most powerful and important spirit in the entire timeline, serving as the ultimate judge and jailer of William Afton. Part 13. The Gift of Life puppet transfers the souls. The mechanism for how the missing children incident victims managed to possess the animatronics is one of the most foundational and critical pieces of lore, centralized around the actions of the puppet. The puppet, possessed by the spirit of Charlotte Emily, Charlie, Henry's daughter, acts as the spiritual catalyst, giving the souls the ability to inhabit the mechanical shells. The origin of the puppet's power. Charlie was William Afton's first confirmed murder victim, killed outside the first restaurant before the bite of 83. Her desperate, protective soul found its way into the puppet animatronic. This initial possession granted the puppet a unique spiritual understanding and the ability to interact with and channel Remnant, the enduring spiritual agony left by traumatic deaths. The puppet became the spiritual guardian and the soul transfer mechanism of the entire haunting. The Give Gifts, Give Life event. This pivotal minigame sequence, confirmed as canonical, illustrates the puppet's intervention after the missing children incident of 1985. The minigame shows the puppet finding the bodies of the 5 murdered children. Utilizing the deep remnant left by their violent deaths, the puppet performs the ritual known as the gift of life. The puppet systematically places the souls of the first 4 children into the core 4 animatronic shells. Gabriel into Freddy Jeremy, into Bonnie Susie, into Chica Fritz, into Foxy. The final action in the sequence, placing the last soul, is heavily tied to Golden Freddy. The 5th child, Cassidy, is either placed into the abandoned, decommissioned Fredbear suit, or her extreme agony naturally binds to the suit as a result of the puppet's action releasing the remnant energy. The connection to Golden Freddy. The puppet's role in this transfer is crucial for the Cassidy possession path. The puppet essentially legitimized the haunting of the golden suit, ensuring that even if the crying child's possession was already in place from 1983, Cassidy's more aggressive, vengeful spirit was also injected into the vessel in 1985. The puppet's actions transformed the physical objects, the animatronics, into vessels of spiritual power. Without Charlie's intervention, the children's souls might have lingered as simple ghosts, unable to directly interact with the physical world or truly torment William Afton. The puppet's gift of life provided the framework for the haunting, setting up the entire central conflict of the franchise. It proves that the animatronics are not just haunted, they were deliberately possessed through a clear, supernatural event orchestrated by the first victim. Part 14. Evidence. Golden Freddy contains 2 souls. One of the most profound and widely accepted theories in the modern lore of Five Nights at Freddy's is the dual soul theory, which posits that the Golden Freddy entity is possessed by 2 distinct spirits, the crying child and Cassidy. This fusion provides a narrative explanation for the entity's contradictory nature, at times passive and traumatized, at other times aggressively vengeful. The core of the evidence for this theory lies in the expanded universe of the franchise, particularly the Fazbear Frights books and the Survival Logbook. 1. The Stitch Wraith analogy, Fazbear Frights. The Fazbear Frights book series introduces a composite character called the Stitch Wraith, a mechanical entity possessed by 2 souls. The stories strongly suggest that 2 spirits can inhabit the same mechanical object simultaneously. One soul is passive, sorrowful, and associated with trauma, mirroring the crying child's fear and sadness. The other soul is aggressive, vengeful, and actively pursuing justice, mirroring Cassidy's intense rage and singular focus on William Afton. This literary precedent provides a canonical framework for the spiritual overlap within Golden Freddy, suggesting that the combined agony of the 2 children creates a single, powerful, dual-faceted entity. The crying child provides the connection to the Fredbear suit and the original trauma of the Afton family, while Cassidy provides the spiritual horsepower and the burning hatred that drives the entity's final actions. 2. The Survival Logbook communications. The Survival Logbook, owned by Michael Afton, contains crucial hidden dialogue that strongly suggests 2 different spirits are communicating with Michael. The questioner, innocent voice. One spirit communicates through faded text, often asking basic questions or confirming simple observations. This voice is interpreted as the crying child, the younger, more confused soul attached to the memory of the plushie and his own death. The confirmer, vengeful voice. The other spirit communicates through complex coded answers, names, Cassidy, and drawings that reveal deeper lore knowledge. This aggressive, knowing voice is identified as Cassidy, the vengeful spirit who can provide the necessary details about the missing children incident. The communication within the logbook is often a collaborative effort between the two spirits, indicating that they are not only co-inhabiting the same spiritual space, but are also capable of communicating and working together to influence events, in this case, reaching out to Michael Afton. The dual soul theory is the most robust way to reconcile the conflicting evidence across the timeline. It explains why Golden Freddy is tied to both the bite of 83, Crying Child, and the intense vengeance of Ultimate Custom Knight, Cassidy. The entity is a composite of the earliest Afton tragedy and the final enduring quest for justice. Part 15. Evidence Golden Freddy contains only Cassidy. While the dual soul theory has gained traction, a significant body of evidence supports the original interpretation that the Golden Freddy entity is possessed only by the vengeful soul of Cassidy. This theory simplifies the possession narrative, attributing the entity's immense power and defining purpose entirely to her singular, uncompromising rage against William Afton. The arguments for Cassidy being the sole inhabitant draw heavily from the later stages of the lore, particularly the Ultimate Custom Knight (UCN) context and her explicit role as the primary tormentor. 1. The one you should not have killed. Dialogue. The strongest proof lies in the identity of the controlling entity in Ultimate Custom Knight. This game is established as the personal hell or purgatory created for William Afton's soul. The core voice lines and themes confirm the antagonist is the one you should not have killed. This label is clearly intended for the vengeful spirit Cassidy. In the game, Golden Freddy appears as a selectable, powerful animatronic, but the player is William Afton, and the antagonist controlling the experience is Cassidy. If Cassidy is the primary controller and punisher, the vast power of the Golden Freddy entity is logically attributed to her, as she is the force actively maintaining Afton's eternal loop. This suggests that Cassidy either is Golden Freddy or possesses a far superior control over his form than any other soul. 2. The logbook's focus on vengeance. While the logbook shows two spirits communicating, the key, high-stakes information, the revelation of names and the focus on the missing children incident is provided by Cassidy's voice. Her connection to the Ultimate Custom Knight phrase solidifies her as the primary, driving force of the entity. The Crying Child's role in this scenario is relegated to providing a physical or spiritual location for the haunting, the Fredbear suit, but not the consciousness that defines Golden Freddy's actions. 3. The simplicity of the narrative. The Cassidy-only theory provides a cleaner, more direct narrative for the franchise's main conflict. The Crying Child dies in the bite of 83 and becomes a passive memory or a benign entity. Cassidy is the one actively murdered in 1985 and is the only soul powerful and angry enough to execute the eternal punishment of Afton. In this model, the Golden Freddy entity is simply the manifestation of Cassidy's rage, using the appearance of the abandoned Fredbear suit as a terrifying non-physical vessel to express her vengeance. The Crying Child's presence is either entirely separate, or his spirit found peace through Henry's efforts before the pizzeria fire, leaving only the uncompromising Cassidy to fulfill the final goal of eternal retribution. This singular focus on her immense anger makes a compelling argument for her being the sole possessor of the most powerful spirit in the timeline. Part 16. Evidence Golden Freddy contains only the Crying Child. An alternative, though less frequently supported in modern lore, theory suggests that the Golden Freddy entity is possessed only by the soul of the Crying Child. This interpretation relies heavily on the original events of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 and the direct physical connection between the child and the Fredbear suit. In this single soul scenario, the crying child's soul is considered the sole inhabitant, while Cassidy is interpreted as another victim of the missing children incident, whose identity, though canon, is irrelevant to the Golden Freddy entity itself. 1. The physical connection to Fredbear. The strongest evidence for the crying child being the sole possessor is the direct physical reality of the bite of 83. The child died from an injury inflicted by the Fredbear animatronic. Since death, agony, and trauma, remnant, are the established binding mechanisms for possession, the crying child's soul would naturally be drawn to the vessel that killed him. Golden Freddy is an iteration of Fredbear, providing a perfect, seamless match between victim and haunted object. 2. The put you back together. Narrative. The final line of the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 minigame, "I will put you back together," is the central promise of this theory. This phrase, associated with the crying child's death, implies a form of preservation or spiritual rebirth that is realized through the immediate possession of the golden suit. It provides the origin story for the haunting, directly linking the crying child to the entity's immediate creation in 1983. 3. The persona of fear and isolation. In the early games, Golden Freddy's manifestations are often sudden, shocking, and appear as a slumped, broken object. This appearance mirrors the crying child's perpetual state of helplessness, fear, and trauma. He is the quiet, passive spirit, an apparition of sadness which aligns with the emotional state of the traumatized child, rather than the overtly aggressive character of Cassidy. The game-crashing mechanic is interpreted as the result of a highly unstable, deeply damaged soul disrupting the game's reality, much like the child's mind was broken by the bite. In this theory, the aggressive vengeance seen in Ultimate Custom Night is viewed as a later development or an unrelated spiritual entity altogether. The core identity of Golden Freddy is rooted in the very first accidental tragedy of the franchise. This interpretation establishes the crying child as the definitive single-source haunting, making the golden animatronic a constant, sorrowful reminder of William Afton's greatest personal failure, the destruction of his own family through his deadly creations. Part 17. The Fusion Theory. Crying Child plus Cassidy working together. The fusion theory represents the most comprehensive and widely accepted interpretation in modern Five Nights at Freddy's lore, successfully synthesizing the disparate evidence surrounding the Golden Freddy entity. This theory posits that the golden suit is possessed by a single, terrifyingly powerful entity composed of two distinct souls working in concert, the crying child and Cassidy. This duality is essential, as it resolves the conflicts between the entity's passive origins in 1983 and its aggressive vengeance in the Ultimate Custom Night era. In this model, the two souls contribute different, essential components to the entity. The crying child, Evan, the identity and trauma. The crying child provides the identity and the physical vessel for the haunting. Having died from the bite of 83, inflicted by the Fredbear animatronic, his soul latched onto the suit, infusing it with the residual trauma and agony, remnant, that allows the initial haunting to occur. He is the reason the entity takes the form of the broken, slumped golden bear. He represents the passive, sorrowful, and broken aspect of the spirit, tied directly to William Afton's failure as a father. Cassidy, the consciousness and vengeance. Cassidy provides the active consciousness, spiritual power, and the overwhelming rage. As a victim of the missing children incident in 1985, her soul was later injected into the already haunted suit, perhaps by the puppet, or through her sheer spiritual will. She is the uncompromising intellectual force that directs the entity's actions. Her fury is the source of the entity's supernatural strength, allowing it to defy physical laws, teleport, and maintain the game-crashing presence. How they function as a single entity. The fusion theory argues that the two souls are effectively merged by the intense remnant within the golden suit, forming a single, split personality entity. They do not fight for control, but rather act as complementary forces. The crying child provides the emotional anchor to the Afton family and the Golden Bear design. Cassidy provides the tactical mind and the energy required to execute their shared goal, the eternal punishment of William Afton. This theory is strongly supported by the communication observed in the survival logbook, where two different spirits interact with Michael Afton. It also perfectly explains why the Golden Freddy entity is both the ultimate victim of the early timeline, Bite of 83, and the ultimate architect of the villain's downfall, Ultimate Custom Night. The entity is the spiritual embodiment of all the suffering William Afton inflicted upon the innocent, ensuring his final fate is dictated by the combined fury of his victims. Part 18, Five Nights at Freddy's. 1. Golden Freddy's Manifestations. The introduction of Golden Freddy in the original Five Nights at Freddy's game established the entity not as a standard walking animatronic, but as a supernatural force capable of entirely disrupting reality. His unique manifestations immediately set him apart from the other possessed characters and cemented his status as the most powerful spirit in the haunting. In the 1993 location, the main four animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, move along predictable paths using the building's infrastructure, ventilation systems, and cameras. Golden Freddy entirely ignores these physical rules. The supernatural manifestations, non-physical appearance. Golden Freddy never appears in the camera feeds in the conventional sense. Instead, his appearance is triggered by seeing a specific poster in the West Hall corner. If the poster changes to a highly zoomed-in, distorted image of the golden suit's face, the player knows the entity is about to appear. This mechanic confirms that his presence is not physical. It is a hallucination or a spectral projection onto the building's reality. Slumped posture and teleportation. The entity appears immediately in the player's office, slumped lifelessly in a position that is broken and terrifying. He does not walk into the room. He instantly teleports. This ability to bypass physical space is a key indication that the entity is entirely spiritual, relying on immense spectral power rather than mechanics. This broken posture is often tied back to the trauma of the crying child, who was destroyed by the suit. Game crash mechanic. The most terrifying and unique function of the entity is the result of prolonged exposure. If the player delays or stares at the entity for too long, Golden Freddy will attack, accompanied by a distorted scream, which causes the entire game software to instantly crash. This mechanic is not just a jump scare. It signifies the entity's ability to warp or corrupt the digital code and the game's environment itself. These manifestations confirm that the spirit possessing the golden suit was fundamentally different from the rest of the haunting. The entity is not constrained by the rules of the world. Its appearance is a direct confrontation with the supernatural, forcing the player, Michael Afton, to deal with the entity instantly by raising the monitor, effectively forcing the spirit to temporarily disappear. The terror of Golden Freddy in this game is derived not from his movement, but from his ability to instantly invade the player's protected space and bypass all expected physical limitations. This supernatural power is the first hint of the immense spiritual force, driven by the combined agony of the crying child and Cassidy, that is dwelling within the forgotten golden animatronic. Part 19. Why Golden Freddy is different from other spirits. The fundamental question concerning Golden Freddy is why he possesses capabilities far exceeding those of the core 4 possessed animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. The simple answer is that the spirit or spirits inhabiting the golden suit are bound by unique circumstances and fueled by a concentration of immense spiritual energy, or remnant, that the other souls do not possess. Reasons for Golden Freddy's unique power: dual possession and agony. The leading fusion theory suggests the entity is powered by 2 souls, Crying Child and Cassidy, combining the traumatic remnant of the bite of 83 with the intense, active rage of the missing children incident victim. This concentration of dual agony grants the entity exponentially greater spiritual strength, making it the most powerful entity in the building. Lack of physical constraint. The original Fredbear suit was decommissioned and likely moved to storage, or simply existed as a broken shell during the 1993 haunting. Unlike the Core 4, which remained active stage performers, and thus needed to move through physical space, Golden Freddy has no binding operational protocol. The spirit is not trying to use a functional mechanical body. It is a raw spiritual projection. This allows the entity to shed the physical limitations of the endoskeleton entirely, hence the ability to teleport and manifest as an apparition. Warping reality. The entity's ability to instantly appear in the office and crash the game is evidence of a power that affects the perceived reality within the location. It is an intrusion, a breakdown of the physical rules of the haunted space. This suggests a unique form of spiritual manipulation, tied to the overwhelming vengeance of Cassidy, who refuses to accept the rules of death or physics. Symbolic importance. Golden Freddy is the suit tied to William Afton's greatest crimes, the accidental death of his own son, Crying Child, and the murder of the most vengeful victim, Cassidy. This symbolic weight makes the suit a nexus of Afton's darkest secrets and his deepest guilt. The power of the haunting is amplified by its direct symbolic connection to the original tragedies of the Afton family. In essence, the other spirits are bound to their mechanical bodies, forcing them to walk and function like animatronics. Golden Freddy is only spiritually attached to a decommissioned shell, granting the soul or souls freedom from those constraints. This liberation from physical rules allows the spirit to operate as a true, reality-bending ghost, making him the only entity capable of escaping the physical confines of the pizzeria, and eventually, the ultimate jailer of William Afton's soul. Part 20. Five Nights at Freddy's 2. The origins of the ghostly form. The appearance of Golden Freddy in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which is a prequel set in 1987, further clarifies the entity's unique status as a spectral projection rather than a physical object. The events of this game take place just 4 years after the Bite of 83, but the Golden Suit is already largely inactive, emphasizing its role as a vessel for raw spiritual manifestation. In 1987, the Fredbear suit, responsible for the bite, had been decommissioned due to the massive liabilities caused by the springlock failures. The suit was likely stored or destroyed, explaining its absence from the main stage. The Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location in this game featured the newer, safer toy animatronics and the salvaged, repaired original animatronics. Golden Freddy's manifestation in 1987. The suit is vacant. since the Fredbear suit was decommissioned. Its appearances in this game are entirely non-physical. The entity manifests as a non-moving ghostly apparition that suddenly appears in the main hallway or in the office. This appearance reinforces the notion that the spirit does not need the physical shell to move. It projects its image into the world. The hidden presence. The player can be attacked by both the full, slumped body of Golden Freddy and, uniquely, a massive, floating golden head that appears in the hallway. This confirms that the spirit has the power to manifest any part of its chosen vessel's image at will, further decoupling the haunting from the physical constraints of the mechanical body. Supernatural attack pattern. Just as in the later 1993 game, the entity's attack in 1987 is immediate and fatal if the player does not react instantly by raising the monitor. This sudden reality warping presence confirms that by 1987, the soul or souls of the Golden animatronic were fully capable of high-level spiritual interference. The context of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 confirms the origins of the ghost-like form. The entity is not moving because its spring locks are broken or because it is out of power. It is moving because it is a spirit projection attached to a decommissioned symbol of tragedy. This realization is vital for understanding the dual soul theory. If the crying child, Evan, possessed the suit in 1983, by 1987, his soul was already powerfully projecting the image of his traumatic end. If Cassidy possessed the suit in 1985 during the missing children incident, her furious rage immediately empowered this projection. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 demonstrates that the haunting of the golden suit was established early and immediately operated outside the normal rules of the facility, setting the stage for the entity's eventual role as the ultimate, eternal jailer. Part 21. Golden Freddy's link to Happiest Day. The Happiest Day minigame sequence is a profoundly important, yet ambiguous, part of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore. It depicts the eventual freedom and peace for the souls of the missing children incident victims. However, Golden Freddy's involvement in this sequence provides strong evidence that the spirit, or at least one half of the dual spirit, remained behind, refusing to find peace. The Happiest Day sequence, the minigame typically seen in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, depicts a gloomy birthday party setting. The spirits of the murdered children, represented by the masks of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, are finally given cake and fine closure, symbolized by their masks floating away and disappearing. This event is interpreted as the release of the four core souls, likely thanks to the actions of the puppet, Charlotte Emily, and the eventual destruction of the old animatronics. Golden Freddy's refusal. The golden suit's mask is always the last one remaining in the minigame sequence. In many interpretations, the mask is seen in the background, forlorn and stationary, waiting for its cake. The key observation is that while the masks of the core four children are freed, the Golden Freddy mask often does not float away or remains on the ground. This visual detail is the primary evidence that the entity's immense spiritual power and vengeance are not resolved by the typical spiritual closure. Implications of remaining behind. The crying child finds peace. In the fusion theory, the Happiest Day event is often interpreted as the moment the crying child's soul finally finds peace. The minigame is literally a belated birthday party, fulfilling the promise of the crying child's final moments in 1983. If his soul is freed, this leaves only the wrathful, active spirit of Cassidy bound to the entity. Cassidy's vengeance prevails. If Cassidy is the sole occupant, her refusal to be freed is absolute proof of her focus on retribution. if the two souls were merged, the partial resolution of the crying child's trauma still leaves Cassidy's vengeance unfulfilled. Her immense hatred for William Afton overrides the promise of peace. The Happiest Day minigame is the pivot point in the lore where the haunting shifts from a general need for justice to a singular personal vendetta. By remaining behind, Golden Freddy is confirmed as the exception to the rule, the most powerful soul who actively chooses to stay trapped in the physical world until their ultimate goal, the eternal punishment of William Afton, is achieved. The lack of closure in this key minigame is the narrative setup for the events of Ultimate Custom Night. Part 22. Golden Freddy's anger toward William Afton. The depth of Golden Freddy's anger toward William Afton is unparalleled by any other spirit in the entire timeline. While every possessed animatronic seeks justice against their killer, Golden Freddy's wrath transcends simple justice and becomes an overwhelming obsession with eternal targeted retribution. This extreme level of hostility stems from the entity's unique dual connection to Afton's greatest crimes. Familial betrayal. The crying child, Evan, represents Afton's failure as a father and the destruction of his own family. The tragedy of the Bite of 83 was a direct result of Afton's negligence in designing the deadly springlock suits and his failure to protect his son from his brother's cruelty. This betrayal generates a deep, complex trauma that is both personal and unavoidable for Afton. Uncompromising vengeance, Cassidy. Cassidy represents the pure, untainted fury of an innocent murder victim. Unlike the other victims of the missing children incident, her spirit is so intense that it cannot be released by fire or spiritual closure. Her anger is a conscious, active force that maintains a singular goal: to ensure Afton suffers permanently. The intensity of the anger. The primary evidence of this extreme anger is its longevity and severity. Most spirits find eventual peace or are destroyed by the fire in Pizzeria Simulator. However, when Afton's soul, as Scraptrap, is trapped in the fire, Cassidy's soul actively intervenes to prevent his final destruction. She refuses to allow him the simple release of death. Instead, she drags his soul into a personalized spiritual prison, Ultimate Custom Night, where she subjects him to an endless, customized loop of torture. The voice lines in Ultimate Custom Night confirm this relationship. The entity speaks directly to Afton, emphasizing the personal nature of the torment. This level of spiritual power and focused hostility, the ability to create and maintain an individualized hell for decades, is exclusive to Golden Freddy. The entity is not just angry, it is the spiritual judge, jury, and executioner for the franchise's main villain. The intense, enduring hatred exhibited by Golden Freddy is the single force that prevents the entire Five Nights at Freddy's narrative from finding closure, ensuring that the saga of William Afton's crimes continues indefinitely. Part 23. The Curse. Golden Freddy keeps William alive. The audio and hidden dialogue in Ultimate Custom Night provide the definitive evidence that Golden Freddy is not just seeking revenge, but has placed a spiritual curse on William Afton, actively preventing his soul from finding rest, death, or peace. This is the ultimate, most powerful act committed by the entity in the established lore. The context of Ultimate Custom Night. The game is understood to be the purgatory created for William Afton's soul after the Pizzeria Simulator fire failed to destroy him. While the fire successfully released the other spirits, Afton's soul remained trapped. It is here that Cassidy, the vengeful consciousness of the Golden Freddy entity, seized control. The controlling dialogue. The key to the curse is revealed through the entity's distorted, echoing voice lines, often heard in the background of the game. The voice, attributed to Cassidy, clearly states the curse's intention. The one you should not have killed is here, identifying Afton as the target and herself as the source of the punishment. I will keep him here. The absolute statement of spiritual imprisonment. This dialogue confirms that the entity has the spiritual authority and power to override the natural processes of death and the attempted destruction of Afton's soul. Cassidy is literally maintaining Afton's suffering by keeping his consciousness locked into the torment loop. The nature of the curse. The curse imposed by Golden Freddy is not merely a haunting. It is an act of eternal spiritual imprisonment. The curse ensures that Afton cannot escape the agony he caused. His hell is customized to feature the characters he created and the victims he killed, forcing him to experience the fear and pain he inflicted upon others, repeating the cycle endlessly. This final, powerful act distinguishes the Golden Spirit from all other entities. It shows that Golden Freddy is the only character willing to sacrifice its own peace by refusing to move on with the Happiest Day event in order to carry out an eternal sentence. The ability to maintain this curse demonstrates the immense, unparalleled spiritual power granted by the dual soul fusion. It establishes the Golden Freddy entity as the spiritual apex of the entire franchise's conflict, serving as the relentless jailer who ensures that the consequences of William Afton's crimes are truly endless. Part 24, Ultimate Custom Night. Cassidy's Revenge Loop Explained. Ultimate Custom Night, UCN, is the dramatic spiritual climax of the first phase of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. It is not a canon location, a simulation, or a dream sequence. It is canonically defined as a spiritual purgatory, or hell created and maintained by Cassidy, the vengeful spirit of Golden Freddy, specifically for the eternal torment of William Afton. The purpose of the loop. The goal of UCN is straightforward: to subject Afton to unending suffering that mirrors the agony he inflicted upon his victims. Cassidy custom designed the experience, creating a night that can never end, featuring a massive randomized roster of over 50 characters from across the franchise. The characters that attack Afton are essentially demons of his past, his creations, animatronics he designed and brought to life, his victims, the souls of the children he murdered. By forcing Afton to fight these entities in an impossible, confined space, Cassidy forces him to relive the consequences of his actions. Every single death within UCN is immediately followed by a spiritual reset, meaning Afton's soul is not destroyed, but is violently revived to start the torment loop over again. This ensures the suffering is eternal and cyclical. The role of Cassidy as tormentor. Cassidy is the consciousness behind the suffering, identified as the one you should not have killed. Her presence is subtle yet absolute. She is not merely participating in the game. She is the player's operator and warden. Evidence of her control includes the constant ambient audio of distorted voices, the chilling line, "I will keep him here," and the direct, non-physical nature of the threats. She has weaponized the remnant and agony of every single tragedy Afton caused, transforming them into the roster of personalized tormentors. Why it is hell, not a simulation. The narrative surrounding UCN confirms it is a metaphysical space governed by spiritual will. The intensity of the agony and the final realization of the endless loop are the culmination of the curse placed by Golden Freddy. It provides the franchise with a definitive answer for the main villain's fate, proving that the spiritual consequences of the missing children incident and the bite of 83 are absolute. Ultimate Custom Night is the enduring legacy of Golden Freddy's uncompromising, powerful vengeance. Part 25. The one you should not have killed. The phrase, "the one you should not have killed," is the definitive spiritual identifier for the vengeful entity controlling the torment in Ultimate Custom Night. This phrase functions as the voice and the absolute authority of the Golden Freddy spirit, confirming that the focus of the eternal suffering is a singular, powerful victim with an unparalleled claim to justice, while the phrase itself is never attached to a specific character model in the game. The consistent narrative context and literary evidence confirm that this voice belongs to Cassidy, the vengeful soul who co-inhabits the Golden Freddy entity. She is the consciousness actively speaking and maintaining the spiritual prison. Meaning and implication. Direct accusation. The phrase is not a general threat. It is a direct, personal accusation aimed squarely at William Afton. It is a declaration of identity and intent, ensuring that Afton knows precisely who is orchestrating his eternal punishment. Claim of ownership. By identifying herself as the One, Cassidy claims ownership of the spiritual justice process. She elevates her own death above the others in terms of spiritual consequence, not because the other victims were less important, but because her own fury was the only one powerful enough to prevent Afton's soul from finding release. The source of power. This title confirms that Cassidy is the primary engine of the Ultimate Custom Night experience. The immense, reality-bending power required to create and maintain this personalized hell flows directly from her uncompromising rage. This power level aligns with the unique, supernatural capabilities observed in Golden Freddy throughout the timeline. If the fusion theory is applied, the crying child, Evan, provides the face and the trauma of the golden suit, while Cassidy provides the controlling will behind this ultimate act of vengeance. She is the voice that speaks the truth of Afton's sins. The phrase itself is a core piece of evidence against the theory that Ultimate Custom Night is just a simple dream or a computer simulation. The line confirms the existence of a spiritual conscious entity that possesses the power and the will to condemn a soul to eternal torment, establishing Cassidy's identity as the ultimate spiritual antagonist of the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. Her power ensures that Afton's suffering remains absolute and endless. Part 26. Golden Freddy's final act. Imprisoning William. The canonical, definitive final act of the Golden Freddy entity, as defined by the first phase of the timeline, is the spiritual imprisonment of William Afton's soul within Ultimate Custom Night. This event serves as the ultimate culmination of the entity's vengeful existence and represents the single greatest exercise of spiritual power in the entire franchise. The sequence leading to this imprisonment is critical. The sacrifice. Michael Afton and Henry Emily successfully lure the remaining haunted animatronics, including Scraptrap, William Afton's possessed body, into the final pizzeria simulator location. Henry then initiates a final cleansing fire, intended to destroy the remnant and free the trapped souls, including Afton's. The refusal of peace. While the souls of Henry, Charlie, the puppet, Michael, and the other 4 missing children incident victims find their release, William Afton's soul is captured. The Golden Freddy spirit, specifically the Cassidy consciousness, refuses the peace that was offered. The spiritual drag. Instead of allowing Afton's soul to be destroyed or pass on, Cassidy uses her immense, concentrated power to seize control of his conscious essence. She drags his soul into a private, spiritual dimension, transforming the moment of his death into a moment of eternal condemnation. This is the ultimate non-physical act of the Golden Freddy entity. Unlike the other animatronics, which focused on physical attacks or localized hauntings, Golden Freddy targeted Afton's very soul and his existence in the afterlife. The Golden Entity becomes the relentless jailer, using its combined agony and hatred to construct the personalized, inescapable prison of Ultimate Custom Night. This imprisonment sequence is vital because it establishes Golden Freddy as the ultimate arbiter of justice in the series. The entity ensures that the villain does not receive the easy escape of death, guaranteeing that the consequences of the missing children incident and the bite of 83 are not merely physical damage or localized hauntings, but an absolute spiritual debt that must be paid for eternity. This act solidifies Golden Freddy's unique place outside the standard rules of the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. Part 27. Is Golden Freddy still active in Security Breach? The status of the Golden Freddy entity in the modern Security Breach era is highly ambiguous, as the central conflict of the timeline shifts from spiritual possession to digital corruption and artificial intelligence. The primary antagonist is no longer the physical William Afton, but his digital consciousness, Glitch Trap, or the mimic entity. Golden Freddy's ultimate status depends on whether the Ultimate Custom Night punishment loop was ever broken, and whether the two souls that compose the entity eventually found peace. Theories on Golden Freddy's status in the modern era. Still imprisoning Afton. One theory maintains that Ultimate Custom Night is an eternal punishment, meaning Cassidy's consciousness is still actively binding William Afton's soul in purgatory. If this is true, then the spirit of Golden Freddy is actively busy in a separate, spiritual dimension and is therefore absent from the physical world of the Mega Pizzaplex. Peace found. If the Ultimate Custom Night loop was somehow completed or broken, it is possible that Cassidy's intense vengeance was finally satisfied, allowing both her soul and the crying child's soul to find release. In this case, Golden Freddy would be entirely inactive, and the focus of the haunting would have shifted completely to the digital echoes of Afton's spirit. Lingering influence, Vanny. There are very subtle references within the Pizzaplex that some fans link to the Golden Entity, such as hidden codes or specific, unused audio files. If Golden Freddy is still active, its influence might be lingering in the code of the Pizzaplex, perhaps attempting to interfere with or fight against the digital spread of Glitch Trap, William Afton's digital self. This would be a spiritual battle fought on a digital front. The physical golden suit is nowhere to be seen in the Pizzaplex, confirming that the haunting, if it exists, is entirely detached from its physical vessel. The most likely scenario is that the Golden Freddy entity, having fulfilled its purpose of enacting eternal justice, is now either in a state of rest or is battling Afton's soul in a spiritual dimension, allowing the Mimic and Glitch Trap to dominate the current physical narrative in Security Breach. The entity's primary, overarching influence over the saga has concluded with the imprisonment of its killer. Part 28. Where is the Golden Spirit now? The question of the Golden Freddy Spirit's current location and status hinges on the final fate of the two souls, the crying child and Cassidy, who comprise the entity. Given the lack of a definitive confirmation in the current timeline, two main paths are generally accepted, both stemming from the events surrounding Ultimate Custom Night. Path 1. The spiritual split, the most likely outcome. The fusion theory suggests a final separation of the two souls. The crying child, Evan. The passive, younger soul found peace after the Happiest Day event, which fulfills the promise of his birthday party. His soul achieved the closure it needed, finally moving on and leaving the fight. Cassidy, the vengeful spirit. The active, vengeful soul remained behind, consumed by the need for retribution. Her spirit is now permanently engaged in maintaining the ultimate custom night purgatory, serving as William Afton's eternal warden. In this scenario, Cassidy's consciousness is spiritually bound to Afton's soul, located in a metaphysical dimension. She is not physically located anywhere in the real world. Path 2. Final release and peace. This less likely scenario suggests that after the immense psychological torment imposed in Ultimate Custom Night, Cassidy's vengeance was finally satisfied. Once Afton's suffering reached the point she deemed sufficient, she allowed both his soul and her own to be destroyed or move on. If this is true, the Golden Freddy entity is completely inactive, and the spirit is finally at rest. The entire 5 Nights at Freddy's saga would then be solely focused on the remaining technological threats, the Mimic and Glitch Trap, which are digital remnants of Afton's influence rather than spiritual hauntings. The strength of the evidence pointing to Cassidy's absolute refusal to let Afton go, specifically the "I will keep him here" line, makes the spiritual split the prevailing and most consistent theory. It means that the Golden Freddy spirit, in its vengeful form, is not haunting the Mega Pizzaplex, but is instead locked in an eternal spiritual cage match with its killer, far removed from the physical concerns of the current world. The golden animatronic itself likely remains a pile of decaying parts in a forgotten safe room, holding only the historical remnant of the entity's past power. Part 29. The Logbook. The single most important clue source. The 5 Nights at Freddy's. The survival logbook is widely considered the single most important and conclusive source of evidence regarding the true, dual identity of the Golden Freddy entity. It is a deceptively simple, spiral-bound journal that, when decoded, provides the key names and confirms the theory of 2 distinct spirits sharing a connection. The logbook's purpose. The logbook is a real-world puzzle containing various sections for Michael Afton, the presumed owner, chore, and night guard, to fill out. Crucially, it features faded, almost invisible text and drawings that do not appear to be written by Michael himself. This hidden text forms a spiritual conversation between the 2 souls and Michael. Key decoded revelations. The name Evan. Through solving ciphers and connecting specific image clues in the logbook to the 5 Nights at Freddy's 4 minigames, the community deduced the name Evan for the crying child. This name provides the first canonical identity for the passive, traumatized soul. The name Cassidy, hidden within a word search puzzle. In the logbook, the word Cassidy is circled multiple times. This discovery gave a canon name to the 5th victim of the missing children incident, and the vengeful spirit who would become the one you should not have killed. Confirming the dual soul. The most vital function of the logbook is the confirmation of the 2 spirits talking theory. The faint, faded text asking simple questions is answered by the darker, firmer handwriting, providing information that only a knowledgeable victim could possess. This dialogue provides concrete proof that 2 spirits, the crying child and Cassidy, are operating within the same narrative space, likely bound to the same spiritual entity, Golden Freddy. The logbook bridged the gap between the 2 major tragedies in the timeline, the Bite of 83, crying child, and the missing children incident, Cassidy. It took 2 isolated tragic events and linked their victims to the same mysterious golden animatronic, making the fusion theory the most logical and evidence-based conclusion for the entity's identity. the logbook remains the franchise's definitive text for decoding the most complex character in the lore. Part 30. The Two Spirits Talking. Theory. The Two Spirits Talking theory is a direct interpretation of the coded communication found within the survival logbook and serves as the most potent evidence for the dual soul nature of Golden Freddy. This theory analyzes the different handwriting styles and the content of the questions and answers to define the two spiritual presences. The logbook contains 3 discernible handwriting or text styles: printed text, official, the standard official prompts for the logbook; dark text, Michael Afton, the primary legible handwriting belonging to the night guard who owns the book, believed to be Michael Afton; faded text, the spirits, the crucial hidden text that represents the communication between the deceased children. Analysis of the faded text. The faded text is distinct and seems to feature 2 different conversational styles, strongly suggesting 2 separate conscious spirits are communicating with Michael Afton and possibly each other. The passive voice, crying child. This voice is characterized by simple, mournful questions or confirmations related to his own traumatic past, such as, "Do you remember your name?" and references to his birthday party and the plushie. This suggests a younger, fragmented consciousness trying to recall its own identity and trauma, perfectly matching the profile of the crying child. The aggressive voice, Cassidy. This voice communicates through coded answers, specific names, and drawings. This spirit reveals the identity of Cassidy, confirms details about the missing children incident, and is capable of more complex information transfer. This highly aware, active communication aligns perfectly with the intense, highly motivated, vengeful spirit. Significance to Golden Freddy. This evidence is vital because it proves that the 2 primary candidates for the Golden Freddy identity are not mutually exclusive. They exist within the same operational space and are collaborating, or at least coexisting, within the narrative. The complexity of the communication within the logbook demonstrates that the Golden Freddy entity is not a simple haunting, but a layered spiritual presence. The passive trauma of the crying child provides the emotional framework, while the active rage of Cassidy provides the intellectual and powerful consciousness. The Two Spirits Talking theory transforms Golden Freddy from a singular ghost into a unique, tragic spiritual partnership. Part 31. The True Identity Debate. Final evidence for each side. The question of Golden Freddy's true identity dominated the Five Nights at Freddy's lore community for years, splitting the fan base between the 2 primary victims. While the fusion theory has largely become the prevailing synthesis, understanding the specific evidence for the single soul arguments is essential for a complete picture of the debate. On one side, the argument for the crying child being the sole possessor rests heavily on the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 4 and the Bite of 83. The key logical argument is based on physical proximity and identity. The child died directly from an injury inflicted by the Fredbear animatronic, which Golden Freddy is. His trauma and agony, or remnant, would naturally bind his soul to the suit he feared most. Furthermore, the final line, "I will put you back together," implies his successful spiritual reassembly into the suit, directly linking the entity's creation to his accidental death. On the opposing side, the evidence for Cassidy as the sole possessor stems primarily from the later stages of the timeline, specifically the Ultimate Custom Night game and the missing children incident. Her logical argument centers on vengeance and power. She is the 5th victim who was filled with unique, uncompromising rage. she is canonically identified as the one you should not have killed, the entity who creates and maintains William Afton's eternal purgatory. Her supreme spiritual power, demonstrated by her ability to control the afterlife, makes her the logical source of Golden Freddy's reality warping abilities. The fusion theory acts as the necessary reconciliation for these conflicts. It draws evidence from both the survival logbook and literary parallels in the expanded universe. The core idea is that the two souls are fused together. The crying child provides the emotional framework, the physical appearance, and the initial haunting from 1983, while Cassidy provides the intellectual consciousness, the extreme power, and the focused goal of eternal vengeance established after 1985. The fusion theory is the most robust model because it accounts for the entire entity's behavior across the timeline, explaining both the passive, mournful appearances and the aggressive, eternal imprisonment. Part 32. What Golden Freddy means for the entire timeline. The Golden Freddy entity is arguably the single most important and consequential character in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's lore. This character, defined by its dual soul nature, is not just another haunted animatronic. It is the spiritual engine that drives the entire cycle of tragedy, revenge, and eventual eternal punishment. Golden Freddy's influence shapes the timeline in 5 crucial ways. The origin of tragedy. The character's physical form, Fredbear, is directly responsible for the first major incident, the Bite of '83, which traumatized the Afton family and led to the first non-murderous death in the core timeline. This established the suit as a symbol of profound, lasting failure. The pinnacle of spiritual power. By housing 2 of the most significant souls, the crying child's trauma and Cassidy's rage, Golden Freddy possesses unparalleled power. This power allows the entity to defy the physical rules of the pizzeria and establish its presence as a genuine, non-physical, reality-warping spectral force. The focus of the haunting. The entity's focus ensured the enduring quality of the haunting. It refused to move on during the Happiest Day event, keeping the vengeance alive and preventing the narrative from simply concluding with the destruction of the original animatronics. The final arbiter of justice. Golden Freddy is directly responsible for the ultimate, conclusive fate of William Afton. By seizing his soul after the pizzeria simulator fire, the entity created Ultimate Custom Night, locking Afton into an endless loop of suffering. This act provides the narrative closure, or perpetual lack thereof, for the series' main villain. The legacy of suffering. The complexity of Golden Freddy's identity, a fusion of personal family trauma and impersonal brutal murder, serves as a constant reminder of the full extent of William Afton's unforgivable crimes. The entity is the walking, teleporting monument to the agony that started with a simple, flawed spring-lock suit and culminated in the eternal damnation of its creator. Golden Freddy is the constant thread of unresolved pain and unrelenting judgment. The character ensures that every subsequent event, from the early tragedies to the late digital hauntings, is a direct echo of the enduring power held by the Golden Spirit. The entity is the final, undisputed boss of the Five Nights at Freddy's spiritual saga.